Security. Get this black woman out of my sight right now. She is contaminating the very air we are all breathing in this room. The command cut through the opulent ballroom like a razor wrapped in velvet. Victoria Langford, the billionaire's poised and ambitious mistress, didn't bother looking at Dr. Elena Harper Kensington when she delivered it. She simply snapped her fingers with crisp authority, the sharp sound echoing as if she were dismissing an inconvenient servant or spoiled hors d'oeuvre. Elena stood frozen near the edge of the grand dance floor, 7 months pregnant, her elegant midnight blue gown, custom-designed and worth more than many Americans' yearly salary, gracefully accentuating the curve of her belly. This was the prestigious Horizon Legacy Gala, an extravagant black tie event she had meticulously organized and championed through her husband's foundation to raise millions for maternal health programs and educational opportunities for underserved communities. And yet, in that glittering moment, she was being publicly discarded like yesterday's news while nearly 200 of New York's most influential elites watched in stunned, complicit silence. Not one person spoke up. Not a single voice rose in her defense. None of them could have imagined that this calculated act of public humiliation was merely the first movement in a much larger, devastating symphony. Because in just a few short hours, a sleek, $80 million private jet would glide onto the private runway of their sprawling Hamptons estate. And the three powerful brothers who would step off that aircraft were not arriving to plead, compromise, or seek mercy. They were coming to systematically dismantle everything the Kensington Empire had built over generations. Hours earlier that same day, Elena had been precisely where her heart and training had always called her to be, not surrounded by the cold calculations of high society, but in the warm, focused intensity of a delivery room at New York Presbyterian Hospital. She held the hand of a terrified young first-time mother who had arrived alone and overwhelmed. "You're doing this so beautifully," Elena whispered, her voice calm, steady, and filled with genuine warmth. The same voice that had guided hundreds of women through the most vulnerable and miraculous hours of their lives. "Breathe with me. One more strong push. Your baby boy is eager to meet you, and he's strong, just like his mama." The baby entered the world at 4:47 p.m., letting out a powerful, healthy cry that filled the room with raw, vibrant life. A perfect 7-pound miracle wrapped in new beginnings. The exhausted mother reached for Elena's hand, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "Thank you, doctor. You're the only one who made me feel like a real person today instead of just another patient on a schedule. You stayed with me the whole time." Elena smiled softly and gave her hand a gentle squeeze, her own eyes misty with the quiet fulfillment she always found in these moments. Every mother and every baby deserves to feel truly seen and supported, especially on a day this important. That's why we do what we do. That was Dr. Elena Harper Kensington through and through. A brilliant, Harvard-educated obstetrician who had safely delivered over 940 babies during her career. She was also the passionate founder of the Harper Scholars Program, an initiative that had already provided life-changing tutoring, mentorship, and college access to more than 12,000 children from low-income neighborhoods across the country. She had built it brick by brick with her own determination, late-night grant writing, school visits that stretched into the early hours, and personal sacrifices in the beginning when funding was scarce and doubters were plentiful. Yet tonight, none of her accomplishments would register with the elite crowd gathered at the gala. To them, she would forever be reduced to one simple, dismissive label: the black woman who had somehow managed to marry into serious money. Her husband, Marcus Kensington III, stood at the pinnacle of American wealth and influence. Forbes had pegged his net worth at over $4.7 billion. As CEO of Kensington Realty Group, he controlled a vast portfolio of luxury skyscrapers, waterfront developments, and commercial properties stretching from Manhattan's iconic skyline to international hubs like London and Singapore. Old money connections blended seamlessly with bold, modern ambition. They had first crossed paths 4 years earlier at an intimate charity auction supporting women's health initiatives. Marcus had been captivated by a simple but deeply personal item she had donated: her handwritten journal from her early days working in community clinics. He pursued her with relentless charm for nearly 7 months, sending thoughtful notes, flowers, and invitations to quiet dinners. She had insisted on starting slow, agreeing only to coffee at first, nothing more. But that coffee stretched into meaningful conversations. Dinners turned into weekend getaways along the coast, and 18 months later, they exchanged vows in a breathtaking $10 million ceremony on the cliffs of Santorini that dominated every society column from coast to coast. For 3 years, Elena had truly believed she had found her fairy tale partnership. She had been heartbreakingly mistaken. Victoria Langford had entered their world almost 2 years earlier. At 30 years old, blonde, polished, and razor-sharp, she was officially Marcus's senior strategy consultant. In reality, their affair had ignited almost immediately during their first extended business trip overseas. Elena began noticing the subtle but unmistakable signs, the late-night messages he would quickly delete, the emergency meetings that stretched suspiciously long, the faint trace of unfamiliar perfume lingering on his shirts. She chose to stay, holding on to the growing life inside her and clinging to the dream of the family she still hoped they could create together despite the cracks. As she hurried home that evening to change into her gala attire, her phone vibrated with a cryptic, anonymous text, "Stay away from the event tonight. They have something planned that will hurt you deeply." She should have heeded the warning. But hope, especially when intertwined with pregnancy and the desire for stability, can be incredibly stubborn. The Grand Horizon Ballroom was a masterpiece of calculated extravagance. Towering arrangements of rare orchids and crystal accents caught the light from massive chandeliers, while champagne towers bubbled with vintage pours that cost more per glass than many families spent on groceries for a week. Soft laughter rippled like background music composed of privilege. Elena arrived at 7:23 p.m., a touch breathless from the rush, her midnight blue gown hugging her form in a way that made her feel both powerful and radiant. She had selected the rich color because Marcus had once told her it made her skin glow like starlight. She had spent nearly an hour perfecting her makeup, wanting to present her best self for the scholars program she had nurtured like a living legacy. The instant she crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Eyes darted away or lingered with thinly veiled judgment. She felt the collective weight of dismissal pressing against her. And there, commanding the center of the room as if the entire evening belonged to her, stood Victoria, positioned right beside Marcus, wearing a nearly identical gown except hers was pure, striking white. Elena approached a familiar donor, a philanthropist who had once contributed generously because of Elena's passionate presentation on maternal health equity. Before she could even finish her warm greeting, Victoria materialized between them like an uninvited shadow in couture. "Mrs. Ellison, how wonderful to see you supporting our important work tonight. I'm Victoria Langford, Marcus's key partner in driving these initiatives forward." The word partner carried heavy, deliberate undertones. "I'm actually his wife," Elena interjected, keeping her tone measured and dignified. "And I founded the Scholars Program that has already impacted so many young lives." Victoria's smile remained flawless and unwavering. "Of course you are, sweetheart. Legally, at least. But we both know who has been truly steering things behind the scenes lately, don't we?" The donor looked visibly uncomfortable, mumbled something about finding her table, and excused herself hastily. This pattern repeated several more times throughout the evening. Every time Elena tried to connect with supporters or thank contributors, Victoria intercepted with surgical precision, smiling warmly while delivering subtle, cutting remarks that undermined her at every turn. It felt meticulously orchestrated, a masterclass in elegant social sabotage. In one particularly stinging exchange, Victoria glanced at the delicate diamond and platinum bracelet on Elena's wrist and let out an exaggerated gasp of faux admiration. "Oh, how quaint and charming. Did you pick that up during a weekend sale somewhere special?" A woman standing nearby leaned toward her companion and whispered just loudly enough for Elena to overhear. "That's an exclusive limited edition piece from a renowned atelier in Geneva. It's easily valued at $90,000 or more." Elena heard every syllable but chose not to correct her. Arguing with someone like Victoria was pointless. People like her thrived on perception and dominance, not facts. The seating arrangement delivered the next layer of calculated cruelty. Elena made her way to the head table she had personally curated weeks earlier, placing each name card with thoughtful care. Her own place card had vanished. In its position sat an unfamiliar woman engaged in animated conversation with Marcus's closest business associates. "Excuse me," Elena said politely. "I believe there's been an error. This is my assigned seat." Victoria appeared almost instantly, as though she had been poised for precisely this confrontation. "This table is reserved exclusively for individuals who provide substantial, ongoing contributions to the Foundation's mission," she announced, her voice projecting clearly to nearby tables to maximize the audience. "You might feel far more comfortable at one of the tables near the service area. I imagine that setting would feel quite familiar and welcoming." The implication hung heavy and unmistakable in the air. Several guests shifted awkwardly in their seats. A few exchanged uneasy glances. Still, no one intervened. Two security personnel approached with practiced, neutral expressions. "Ma'am, we'll need you to step aside while we confirm your invitation for this evening's event." "Confirm my invitation?" Elena's voice caught slightly despite her composure. "I am Dr. Elena Kensington. I am Marcus's wife, and I personally planned and organized this entire gala. My name is prominently featured on all the materials." The guards' faces remained professionally impassive. "We're simply following established protocol, ma'am." Elena looked desperately across the vast ballroom toward Marcus. He had been watching the entire sequence unfold. Their eyes locked across the sea of glittering guests and crystal. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his expression, perhaps a shadow of guilt, a remnant of the man she had once believed in. Then it vanished completely, replaced by cool detachment. "Victoria is overseeing all the logistics this evening," he stated flatly when she called out to him. "Please don't create an unnecessary scene here, Elena. We can address whatever this is later at home." Later at home. His pregnant wife was being systematically stripped of dignity in front of New York's elite, and his primary concern remained avoiding any public disruption. The security team escorted her to a small, isolated table positioned uncomfortably close to the kitchen entrance. The seats surrounding her remained vacant throughout the long evening. No one wanted to risk association with the woman the mistress had clearly targeted for social exile. But the deepest wound was still to come. Scanning the room, Elena spotted her closest confidant of 17 years, Lauren, seated at Victoria's main table and laughing genuinely at something Victoria had just shared. Lauren, the friend who had stayed up with her through medical school exams, who had comforted her after her father's sudden passing, who knew every private hope, fear, and vulnerability. Elena walked over slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, desperately seeking some explanation that could make sense of the betrayal. "Lauren, why are you sitting here with her?" Elena asked, voice low but urgent. Lauren avoided direct eye contact, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her napkin. "She offered major funding for my community arts center, Elena. Almost $400,000. I have a team of 15 people whose livelihoods depend on keeping that program alive. I couldn't turn it down. You know exactly what she's doing to my marriage and to my entire life right now." A heavy, telling silence stretched between them, the kind of silence that revealed far more than any words could. "I'm really sorry," Lauren finally whispered, but she made no move to stand. She remained seated exactly where she was, aligned with the woman actively tearing apart her best friend's world. Elena returned to her solitary table near the kitchen and rested both hands protectively over her belly, feeling her unborn daughter deliver a soft, reassuring kick against her palms. "At least you're still here with me, my sweet girl," she thought. "At least in this moment, I'm not entirely alone." The live auction portion of the evening commenced promptly. Victoria ascended the stage with the confidence of a conqueror claiming her throne, her white gown flowing dramatically behind her, her smile radiant enough to dazzle. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for gracing us with your presence at this extraordinary evening dedicated to meaningful change," she began, her tone smooth as aged whiskey laced with venom. She proceeded to acknowledge board members, major corporate sponsors, and Marcus's inner circle of golfing companions and business allies, praising their contributions in lavish detail. She never uttered Elena's name. Not once. Not even in passing. Elena had devoted 3 intense years to expanding the Scholars Program from a modest pilot into a transformative force. She had authored every initial grant proposal, cultivated every significant donor present in the room, and personally toured more than 50 schools to ensure the curriculum took root effectively. Now she was being methodically erased from her own life's work right before her eyes. A profound shift occurred deep within Elena. The quiet fear and humiliation that had kept her restrained all evening began transforming into something far more resolute and unyielding, a determination that refused to be rendered invisible any longer. She rose from her seat. The entire ballroom seemed to inhale collectively as she walked deliberately toward the stage, the measured click of her heels against the polished marble floor sounding like an unstoppable countdown. Each step carried quiet defiance. Victoria noticed her approach. Her flawless smile wavered for the briefest instant before locking back into place. "Security," she called out with practiced sweetness. "It appears we have an uninvited individual making her way toward the podium." "I am not uninvited," Elena stated clearly and firmly as she continued forward. "I am Marcus Kensington's wife, and this foundation and its flagship program are built on the work I have led for years." The security staff hesitated, glancing uncertainly between Victoria and Marcus. Marcus suddenly found his champagne flute intensely fascinating and offered no guidance. Victoria descended from the stage like a general advancing, her white dress trailing like a banner of war. She stopped mere inches from Elena, close enough that her signature perfume became almost suffocating. "You are only embarrassing yourself further," Victoria hissed, voice low but venomous. "And more importantly, you are embarrassing him. Do you honestly believe that marrying into wealth automatically grants you a permanent seat at tables like this?" She gestured broadly at the lavish surroundings, the chandeliers, the flowing champagne, the sea of designer attire. "You never truly belonged here. You never will. You're simply an accomplished woman from more modest beginnings who enjoyed a fortunate chapter. And fortunate chapters always reach their end." Elena's response was calm, yet edged with unbreakable steel. "I am not leaving this stage or this event." What unfolded in the following minutes would dominate headlines, social media, and cable news cycles across the country within 24 hours. Victoria placed one hand deliberately over her own stomach in a protective gesture mirroring the one Elena made instinctively dozens of times each day. Then she raised her voice so that it carried clearly across multiple nearby tables. "You really do need to leave now. Because I am carrying something you could never provide him. A legitimate Kensington heir with the proper bloodline, not some." She allowed the sentence to trail off unfinished. The pregnant silence that followed completed the thought with devastating cruelty. Elena felt the impact of those words like repeated physical strikes. Her vision blurred momentarily with a wave of dizziness and pain. Her hands moved automatically to shield her belly. "Marcus," she whispered, offering one final, desperate appeal to the man she had once trusted with her heart. "Marcus, please." Marcus Kensington III, the billionaire real estate titan who commanded boardrooms and city skylines with ease, looked directly at the woman carrying his child, the same woman he had courted so persistently, the one he had married in a spectacle of romance, and said absolutely nothing. That profound, damning silence ignited everything that followed. Victoria shoved Elena forcefully with both hands. Elena stumbled backward, her heels snagging on the hem of her gown. Then Victoria's sharp designer stiletto connected with deliberate, vicious precision against Elena's pregnant abdomen. The kick was no accident or clumsy misstep. It was targeted and intentional. Elena collapsed hard onto the unforgiving marble floor, her beautiful gown tearing at the side as she fell. Her hands instinctively cradled her stomach. Nearly 200 guests witnessed every horrifying second in real time. Hundreds of phones captured the footage from every possible angle. And yet, not one voice cried out in protest. Not one person stepped forward to intervene. The collective silence felt louder and more damning than any scream could have been. A young waiter stationed near the kitchen entrance dropped his heavy silver tray in shock. The explosive crash of shattering crystal and china was the only sound that broke the ballroom's stunned hush. Elena lay curled protectively on the cold floor, her body shielding her unborn child as best she could. Then she felt it, a small but unmistakable kick from within, as if her daughter were saying, "I'm still fighting right here with you, Mama." Marcus finally stirred and walked over. For one fleeting, hopeful heartbeat, Elena thought he might reach down, help her to her feet, and finally choose her publicly. Instead, he looked down at her with an expression as emotionless as still water and said in a flat, detached tone, "Elena, just go home now. We can talk about all of this later." Later, his pregnant wife had just been physically assaulted in public, and his only priority was preserving the evening's decorum. Two young servers earning modest hourly wages rushed forward to assist Elena to her feet with genuine concern. A busboy quietly retrieved her fallen clutch purse and offered it to her gently. These everyday workers displayed more basic human decency and compassion in those few moments than every wealthy attendee combined. As Elena made her way slowly toward the exit, a young black female staff member whispered urgently to her colleague nearby, "Oh my God, does she even realize who that other woman truly is behind the scenes?" Her coworker shook her head quickly, eyes wide with caution. "Just forget it. Don't say anything more." Elena overheard the exchange and quietly filed the comment away in her mind for later reflection. Outside, the cool night air struck her like a sudden wave, sharp and clarifying. She leaned against a cool marble column for support, her breathing ragged and uneven, her hands still trembling as they rested over her belly. Footsteps approached from behind. She tensed, bracing instinctively for another confrontation. But the woman who emerged from the shadows was tall and composed, with natural curls framing a face that had clearly witnessed far too much injustice to be easily shocked anymore. Her official badge identified her as Detective Naomi Brooks, NYPD. "Ma'am, I saw everything that just happened inside," Detective Brooks said quietly, her tone professional yet laced with regret. "Are you physically okay right now?" Elena met her gaze steadily. "You witnessed it all, and yet you chose not to say or do anything in the moment." Detective Brooks' expression tightened visibly with shame. "I was attending as a guest tonight, and I didn't want to escalate things or cause a bigger disturbance. That's no real excuse, and I apologize for my hesitation. It was wrong. Please allow me to escort you to the hospital immediately so we can ensure your baby is safe and unharmed." For the first time throughout the entire humiliating evening, someone had finally treated Elena like a fellow human being whose well-being genuinely mattered. At New York Presbyterian Hospital shortly after midnight, the environment felt like an entirely different universe compared to the gala's excess. Harsh fluorescent lighting replaced sparkling chandeliers. The clean, sharp scent of antiseptic replaced clouds of expensive perfume. The steady beeping of monitors replaced the soft strains of live chamber music. Dr. Amina Okoro, a highly respected Nigerian-American obstetrician who had known and collaborated with Elena professionally for years, conducted the ultrasound examination personally and with great care. "The baby's heartbeat remains strong and steady," she announced with evident relief after a thorough review. "I'm detecting elevated stress markers, but there is no visible physical trauma or injury to the fetus. You were very fortunate tonight, Elena. However, I must insist on complete bed rest and zero additional stress or confrontation moving forward. Any further trauma could potentially trigger premature labor. Do you fully understand how serious this is?" Elena nodded mechanically, but her thoughts were already racing ahead with practical fears. Where would she even go from here? Her entire carefully constructed life had just imploded like a fragile structure caught in a violent storm. The answer arrived roughly 90 minutes later when Marcus Kensington walked into her private hospital room, carrying himself with the entitled air of someone who essentially owned half the building thanks to his family's long history of substantial donations. He didn't inquire about her condition. He didn't ask about the baby's well-being. He simply placed a thick manila envelope onto the bed beside her. "Sign these documents." Elena opened the envelope with unsteady hands. Inside were annulment papers, not standard divorce filings, but legal documents designed to retroactively declare their entire marriage invalid and non-existent from the beginning. $3 million, Marcus stated matter-of-factly, as casually as if he were negotiating the purchase of additional commercial space. That represents an extremely generous settlement given everything that has transpired. Given everything? Elena's voice rose with a mix of disbelief and rising anger. "I am 7 months pregnant with your child. We have been married for 3 years. I was physically assaulted by your mistress in front of nearly 200 witnesses tonight, and your response is to offer me money, so I will simply disappear quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his mask of control remained firmly in place. This isn't really about the child. It's about safeguarding the Kensington family reputation and legacy above all else. My mother has been very explicit about her expectations in this matter. Your mother? A flicker of something, guilt mixed with fear, crossed his face briefly before the detached expression returned. Just sign the papers, Elena. It truly will be better for all parties involved in the long run. Better for everyone, or simply better and more convenient for you and your family? He offered no reply. He turned on his heel and exited the room without another word or backward glance. Elena stared at the dense legal language on the documents until the words blurred together into meaningless shapes. She refused to allow herself even a single tear. She would not grant them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The following morning revealed the full, premeditated extent of her orchestrated downfall. Her credit cards were declined at the hospital gift shop when she tried to purchase a small item. When she contacted the bank, a sympathetic but powerless representative informed her that her name had been removed from all joint accounts and credit facilities effective early that morning. Access to the foundation's administrative systems, the organization she had helped shape from its earliest days, was now completely denied. Her login credentials had been revoked overnight without explanation. A news notification pinged on her phone, causing her stomach to drop with fresh nausea. The headline read, Kensington heir ends turbulent marriage to unstable physician. Sources cite erratic and jealous behavior. Victoria Langford appointed new director of Horizon Foundation. The accompanying article, sourced from anonymous insiders close to the family, portrayed Elena as emotionally volatile, prone to unfounded suspicions, and entirely unsuited for the rarefied world of elite philanthropy and society. 3 years of dedicated, impactful work, thousands of children supported, hundreds of babies delivered safely, reduced to sensationalized tabloid fiction designed to destroy her credibility. Her phone rang. It was her mother, voice trembling with worry and helplessness. Sweetheart, I saw the horrible stories online. Please tell me none of it is accurate. None of it is true, Mama. Not a single word of it. I believe you completely. But who else out there is going to believe us? We're ordinary people to families like theirs. We don't carry the same weight or influence. The word ordinary landed like a heavy blow, cutting deeper than any of Victoria's public insults had. Elena sat alone in the sterile hospital room, watching rain trace slow, tear-like paths down the window pane. She had exactly $87 remaining in her personal checking account. She was 7 months pregnant with nowhere secure to return to. She had no friends left she could fully trust after the Gala betrayal. Her immediate family lacked the resources to offer meaningful protection against such powerful forces. She scrolled through her contacts until she reached names she had deliberately avoided calling for nearly 4 years. Her 3 older brothers. The men who had each worked multiple jobs and made countless sacrifices to help put her through Harvard Medical School. The brothers she had gradually distanced herself from after marrying Marcus because she had been determined to prove she could succeed and build a life entirely on her own merits. Pride, foolish, stubborn, and now painfully expensive pride, had isolated her at the worst possible moment. She dialed her oldest brother, Darius, first. The call rang several times before connecting to his executive assistant. Harper Global Ventures, Mr. Harper's office. How may I direct your call? This is Elena Harper. I need to speak with my brother right away. It's an emergency family matter. There was a noticeable pause on the line. I apologize, Ms. Harper, but Mr. Harper is currently locked in critical emergency strategy sessions and cannot be interrupted under any circumstances. The company is facing a major $2.8 billion legal challenge that has the entire leadership team in full crisis mode. Elena's heart sank heavily. She tried her second brother, Jamal, straight to voicemail. Her youngest brother, Marcus Jr., named affectionately after their father, had a disconnected number. Even the safety net she had once taken for granted seemed to be unraveling simultaneously. She turned on the room television, seeking any distraction from her spiraling thoughts. The news coverage only deepened the wound. Harper Global Ventures confronts catastrophic lawsuit. Analysts predict potential collapse of major logistics empire. It appeared her family's hard-built business was also under siege. The people she might have turned to as a last resort were apparently battling their own overwhelming disasters. Elena placed both hands gently on her belly once more. "It looks like it's just you and me now, little one," she murmured softly. "Just you and me against whatever comes next." The sharp knock at her door came at 3:17 p.m. Vivian Kensington, Marcus's formidable mother and the undisputed matriarch of the Kensington dynasty, swept into the room with the regal bearing of royalty conducting an inspection of lesser quarters. She wore a classic Chanel ensemble and carried an ostentatious bouquet of roses, her smile fixed in the manner of a predator who had already consumed its prey and was now toying with the remains. "Elena, my dear, I am so terribly sorry about this dreadful misunderstanding that has unfolded," she began smoothly. Elena pushed herself up slowly into a sitting position, wary but composed. "Mrs. Kensington, I didn't anticipate seeing you here today. Please, call me Vivian. After all, we are still family in a sense, aren't we?" The word family sounded grotesquely insincere coming from her lips. After everything that has occurred, such formalities feel rather pointless now. She perched elegantly on the edge of the hospital bed and took Elena's hand in hers. Her grip was cold and unyielding. "I genuinely want to help you through this difficult time, my dear. Truly I do. But before anything else, you must come to understand one fundamental truth about our family and its priorities." "Understand what exactly?" Elena asked, her voice steady despite the growing dread. Vivian's pleasant smile remained perfectly intact, but her eyes transformed into something far colder and more ancient. "I was the one who brought Victoria Langford into Marcus's professional orbit nearly 3 years ago, the precise week I first learned he was becoming seriously involved with you. You were never intended to become a permanent part of this family. I fully expected Marcus to eventually recognize the mismatch and correct course on his own. Instead, the sentimental fool actually developed real feelings for you. That development complicated my original strategy considerably. You personally arranged all of this?" Elena whispered, the revelation hitting her with the force of a second assault. "The affair, the public humiliation last night, everything? I was simply safeguarding our family's bloodline, our established legacy, and our hard-earned social standing," Vivian replied without a trace of remorse or hesitation. "Because your presence, and especially any children you might have, would have diluted a lineage that has remained carefully preserved and uncompromised for 7 full generations. Because every time I observed you at one of our private Kensington gatherings, I saw everything my forebears had painstakingly constructed being subtly tainted and altered by your very existence." The genteel facade had now completely dissolved, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Here is exactly how this situation will conclude," Vivian continued in a brisk, businesslike tone. "You will sign those annulment documents without further delay. You will accept the financial settlement offered. You will remove yourself and your child permanently from our world and our awareness. In return, I give you my word that I will not expend any further effort destroying whatever fragments remain of your current existence. However, if you choose to resist or fight this outcome," Vivian rose gracefully, smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her impeccable suit, "then I will dedicate myself to ensuring your child experiences not one single day of untroubled peace or opportunity. Not in any prestigious school, not in any desirable neighborhood, and certainly not in any promising career path. The Kensington name and network of influence extend far deeper and wider than you could possibly comprehend or counteract. You now have precisely 24 hours to make the wise decision, my dear. I strongly suggest you use that time productively." The door clicked shut with finality behind her. Elena remained sitting in the heavy, suffocating silence of the room, her entire body trembling with a mixture of rage, fear, and dawning resolve. Then her phone rang with an unknown number. She answered it with hands that still shook noticeably. "Elena, it's Darius. Do not say a single word out loud right now. Just listen very carefully to everything I tell you." Her oldest brother's voice came through steady, controlled, and reassuringly familiar. "That massive lawsuit threatening our company is entirely fabricated on our end. We engineered the rumors and leaks ourselves so that Marcus, his mother, and their entire circle would believe we were distracted, vulnerable, and preoccupied with survival. We have been fully aware of Vivian's coordinated campaign against you for over 7 months now. We have known the true nature of Victoria's role for nearly 2 years. We have been waiting patiently and strategically for them to commit an irreversible overreach exactly like what happened last night. Darius, you knew about all of this the entire time? Elena breathed, barely able to process the revelation. Tomorrow Marcus is hosting what they are pompously calling their victory luncheon at the family estate in the Hamptons. I need you to attend that event exactly as planned. Allow them to believe without any doubt that they have achieved total victory and that you are completely defeated. And then you will witness firsthand as we methodically take apart everything they value most. Outside her hospital window, a sleek black SUV pulled quietly into the parking lot below. The driver glanced up toward her room and gave a single, deliberate nod of acknowledgement. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the faintest genuine smile touched Elena's lips despite everything she had endured. The Kensington estate encompassed 58 meticulously maintained acres of prime oceanfront property in the Hamptons, a sprawling testament to inherited wealth, architectural excess, and unapologetic displays of power. It featured multiple tennis courts, an Olympic-sized swimming pool, an elaborate hedge maze whose annual maintenance budget exceeded the yearly earnings of most middle-class households, and, most critically for the day's unfolding events, a private jet runway capable of accommodating large corporate aircraft without issue. Marcus had never once mentioned the existence of that runway during their years of marriage. It was simply one more hidden element in a relationship that had been constructed largely on secrets and unequal power. The so-called victory luncheon took place on the estate's expansive main terrace, offering sweeping, unobstructed views of the Atlantic. 170 carefully selected guests enjoyed service on heirloom silver passed down through 5 generations of the family. The champagne served was aged and rare enough that a single bottle cost more than many hardworking Americans earned in a full month. At the absolute center of the gathering, radiant and triumphant in her signature pristine white attire, sat Victoria Langford, basking in her apparent conquest. The Horizon Foundation is stepping boldly into an exciting new chapter today, she proclaimed, her voice carrying effortlessly across the manicured lawns. A chapter defined by fresh vision, decisive leadership, and several wonderful developments. She paused dramatically for effect, allowing anticipation to build. I am overjoyed to announce personally that Marcus and I are expecting our first child together very soon. Thunderous applause erupted immediately from the assembled guests. Vivian Kensington, seated prominently at the head table, dabbed delicately at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, performing the role of the delighted future grandmother with practiced theatrical flair. Elena observed the entire scene quietly from a discreet position at the far edge of the terrace. She had arrived without fanfare or announcement, precisely following the instructions Darius had given her. Security personnel monitored her movements closely but had not yet moved to remove her. Let them believe without question that they have won completely, her brother had emphasized. Victoria spotted her during the second course of the meal. A brief flash of surprise crossed her features before settling into an expression of smug, satisfied contempt. "Security," she called out loudly, drawing every eye in her direction. "It seems we have an uninvited guest attempting to intrude upon our private celebration once again." "I am not here to disrupt anything or cause trouble," Elena replied with remarkable calm. "I am simply here to observe." "Observe what exactly?" Victoria laughed, clearly playing to her attentive audience. "Your own total and final irrelevance in all of this." "No," Elena answered, her voice perfectly even and almost serene in its certainty. "I am here to observe yours." The words lingered heavily in the salty ocean air, scented with expensive champagne and fresh-cut flowers. Victoria's confident smile faltered for the smallest fraction of a second. Then a low, powerful rumble began in the distance, initially faint enough to be mistaken for a routine helicopter from a neighboring property. The Hamptons were, after all, densely populated with billionaires and their expensive toys. But this particular sound was distinctly different, deeper, more commanding, the unmistakable signature of serious, high-performance aviation machinery. One by one, heads throughout the terrace turned upward toward the clear sky. A sleek, Matte black Gulfstream G800 was making its final approach and descent directly toward the Kensington private runway. Its swept wings and polished fuselage gleamed under the bright morning sunlight. The tail number stood out clearly. It touched down with expert precision, engines roaring as reverse thrust slowed it smoothly along the runway before it taxied to a complete, whisper-quiet stop. For several long, breathless moments, nothing happened. The aircraft door stayed sealed. The guests remained frozen in collective anticipation. Then the doors swung open smoothly. The integrated stairs descended. 3 commanding figures emerged one after another. First came Darius Harper, 41 years old, CEO of Harper Global Ventures, with a verified personal net worth exceeding $15 billion. He moved with the effortless, unhurried authority of a man who had built an empire through strategic brilliance and had rarely, if ever, lost anything of true importance. Second was Jamal Harper, 38, founding partner of Harper Capital Partners managing over $10 billion in assets. He was concluding a quiet but intense phone conversation as he descended. Yes, proceed immediately with the comprehensive freeze on every single Kensington-linked financial account and partnership. No exceptions whatsoever. Effective right now. Third came their youngest brother, Marcus Harper, the family's namesake for their father, 35, a formidable civil rights attorney with 5 hard-won victories before the United States Supreme Court. He carried a substantial leather briefcase that Marcus Kensington would soon discover contained more than 15 years of meticulously compiled, irrefutable documentation concerning the Kensington family's private dealings. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom appeared seamlessly at the base of the stairs. The 3 brothers entered the vehicle without so much as acknowledging the stunned crowd watching them. The car proceeded directly across the grounds toward the main terrace. Darius stepped out first and strode through the parting sea of guests with the focused intensity of a blade cutting through silk. His gaze remained locked unwaveringly on one target, Marcus Kensington III. "Mr. Kensington," Darius began, his resonant voice carrying clearly across the now-silent terrace. "We have never had the opportunity to meet face-to-face until this moment. However, I and my brothers have known virtually every relevant detail about you, your family, and your operations for more than 6 years now." Marcus's complexion had drained rapidly to the color of aged parchment. Who exactly are you people?" "Darius Harper. These are my brothers Jamal and Marcus. And the woman you and your circle have spent the last 3 years attempting to systematically destroy and erase, Dr. Elena Harper Kensington, is our beloved younger sister." The audible, collective gasp that rose from the gathered guests could likely have been heard clear across the water to the distant shoreline. Darius continued speaking in a tone that remained conversational, yet carried unmistakable steel. "That enormous $2.8 billion lawsuit you have been hearing so much about? Completely manufactured by us from the beginning. We planted the necessary rumors and information leaks ourselves. We required you and your inner circle to believe that Harper Global Ventures was weakened, distracted, and vulnerable at this critical time." Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times uselessly, struggling for words. "That kind of coordinated misinformation constitutes market manipulation, securities violations. It's outright illegal." "Actually, it does not," Darius replied mildly, almost pleasantly. "We never filed any formal public documents or made false statements to regulators. We simply ensured that the appropriate whispers reached exactly the right influential ears at the right moments." He offered a smile that contained zero warmth. "We have been monitoring your mother's 3-year campaign of sabotage against Elena for 7 months. We have possessed full knowledge of Victoria's true role and motivations for nearly 2 years. We deliberately waited for you to commit a mistake of this magnitude before acting." "You're bluffing," Marcus managed weakly. "This entire confrontation is nothing more than an elaborate, desperate bluff." "Am I?" Darius nodded once toward Jamal. Jamal raised his phone, turning the screen so Marcus could see it clearly. "As of 29 minutes ago, Harper Global Ventures has initiated a full forensic review and temporary suspension of every existing contract and shipping agreement with Kensington Realty Group. That represents approximately $61 million in critical annual revenue for your company, currently frozen pending the outcome of our comprehensive internal investigation." Marcus spun desperately toward one of his aides. Contact my entire legal team immediately. All of them. Right now. It becomes substantially more problematic from here. The youngest brother, Marcus Harper the attorney, interjected calmly. He opened his briefcase with deliberate, unhurried movements. I possess documented evidence of 19 separate wire transfers totaling $2.9 million sent from Vivian Kensington directly to Victoria Langford across a 39-month period. I also have clear audio recordings of multiple telephone conversations in which your mother meticulously planned and directed Elena's complete removal from this family. Additionally, I hold sworn affidavits from 7 current and former members of your household staff detailing Vivian's repeated private comments concerning your wife's race and perceived unsuitability. He passed a tablet device to a prominent tech executive seated nearby, who also happened to be one of the foundation's largest donors. Feel free to examine the materials yourself. Every piece of metadata is intact and has already been independently verified by multiple forensic accounting and digital authentication experts. Vivian Kensington rose abruptly from her seat, her carefully maintained composure finally fracturing visibly. This entire spectacle is completely preposterous and defamatory. The attorney turned his attention smoothly toward Victoria. And now we come to you, Victoria Langford. Born Victoria Barrett. Your father previously served as CEO of Barrett Dynamics Logistics. His company suffered irreversible collapse following the loss of a major competitive bidding process to Harper Global Ventures back in 2016. He tragically took his own life roughly 7 months after the bankruptcy declaration became final. We extend our sincere condolences for your loss. No child should ever have to endure the pain of losing a parent in such devastating circumstances. However, the choices you subsequently made, the sustained public humiliation of our sister, the deliberate physical assault upon a visibly pregnant woman, those decisions belong entirely to you. And every choice, regardless of motivation, eventually carries its own unavoidable consequences. Marcus Kensington had remained largely frozen throughout the unfolding revelations, his face cycling rapidly through expressions of shock, denial, calculation, and dawning terror. This constitutes nothing short of harassment and trespassing, he finally protested. You cannot simply land an aircraft on private property and level baseless accusations against my family without repercussions. Harassment? Darius raised one eyebrow slightly. I am not issuing threats of any kind. I am merely presenting thoroughly documented facts for everyone present to consider. For instance, this particular document. He withdrew a thick folder from his brother's briefcase. A detailed merger agreement drafted in 2020 between Kensington Realty Group and Harper Global Ventures. According to the terms outlined within it, you were actively preparing to sell controlling interest in your company to us for $950 million. Every last trace of color drained completely from Marcus's face. Until, of course, you encountered our sister and realized that marrying strategically into the Harper family offered far greater long-term financial and social advantages than any straightforward corporate sale ever could. Darius continued, his voice hardening into pure, unyielding resolve. You knew precisely who Elena truly was from the very first day you approached her. You deliberately pursued her because of her direct familial connection to us and the resources we control. Every declaration of love, every romantic gesture, every promise you made was nothing more than a calculated transaction designed to secure access to Harper Global's networks and capital. The silence that followed those words was absolute and deafening. Every single guest, server, and security detail present stood motionless, absorbing the full weight of the exposure. Elena stepped forward from the edge of the terrace. Her voice emerged quietly at first, but carried clearly. Marcus, is any of what they are saying actually true? He could offer no denial. He could produce no defense. He simply stood paralyzed, trapped beneath the crushing weight of his own carefully concealed deceptions finally laid bare for all to witness. That telling silence provided Elena with every confirmation she required. The sharp wail of approaching police sirens suddenly shattered the frozen tableau. 3 marked NYPD vehicles sped up the estate's long, circular driveway, lights flashing brightly against the perfectly trimmed hedges. Detective Naomi Brooks emerged from the lead cruiser, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. She walked with purposeful strides directly to Victoria Langford. Ms. Langford, you are under arrest for assault in the second degree upon a pregnant victim. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Victoria's remaining facade of control disintegrated entirely in that instant. This is completely insane and outrageous. Marcus, do something immediately. Tell them this is all some ridiculous misunderstanding. But Marcus remained utterly immobile. His gaze stayed fixed helplessly on the stack of documents Darius still held, the undeniable proof of his calculated betrayal, his fraudulent intentions, and the hollow foundation upon which their marriage had been constructed. The metallic click of the handcuffs closing around Victoria's wrists sounded final, like the closing period on a long, ugly chapter. Smartphones across the terrace captured every frame from multiple angles. By nightfall, the raw footage would accumulate tens of millions of views worldwide, sparking intense public debate and outrage. Detective Brooks and her team then turned their attention toward Vivian Kensington. Mrs. Kensington, you will be named as a co-defendant in the impending civil litigation. The charges will encompass conspiracy to commit assault, intentional infliction of severe emotional distress, financial manipulation, and multiple violations of civil rights statutes. Vivian gripped the edge of the nearest table so tightly that her knuckles turned bone white. You cannot possibly do this to someone like me. Do you have any conception of who I am or the scale of what my family has constructed over decades? I understand exactly who you are, the attorney brother replied, his tone colder than the ocean breeze sweeping across the terrace. You are a woman who invested 3 full years and nearly $3 million in a deliberate, sustained effort to destroy your own son's marriage solely because you could not tolerate the presence of a successful black woman within your carefully guarded social circle. He addressed the remaining guests directly. Major outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and CNN, will begin publishing comprehensive, thoroughly sourced coverage of these events within the next 4 minutes. I would strongly advise anyone here who wishes to avoid any association with the Kensington name and its rapidly unfolding consequences to begin distancing themselves immediately and publicly. At least half the guests were already frantically checking their phones, composing urgent messages, and preparing rapid exits. Darius leaned in closer to Marcus, lowering his voice so that only those in the immediate vicinity could hear. You now have exactly one opportunity, only one, to influence how the remainder of this plays out for you personally. Testify completely and truthfully against both your mother and Victoria. Provide full, unrestricted access to every relevant document, email, recording, and communication. Cooperate without reservation with our legal representatives and with law enforcement authorities. If you agree to these terms, we will actively recommend leniency to the prosecutors. Your company will continue to exist, although it will operate under new, stringent oversight and compliance measures. Your personal reputation will survive in a significantly diminished form. If you refuse this single chance. Darius allowed the pause to emphasize the gravity. Harper Global Ventures will immediately terminate every remaining business relationship with Kensington Realty. Your board of directors will vote to remove you as CEO before the close of business today. Your mother's personal and family assets will remain indefinitely frozen. And every major business journalist in the United States will receive copies of the 2020 merger documents that clearly demonstrate you pursued and married our sister under entirely false and self-serving pretenses. Marcus turned slowly to look at his mother. Vivian's face had hardened into a mask of cold command and fury. Don't you dare even consider it, she hissed at him. After every single sacrifice I have made on your behalf throughout your entire life. After everything I have protected and built for this family. Marcus's voice finally cracked under the immense pressure, revealing the long-buried fractures beneath his polished exterior. You have dictated and controlled virtually every significant decision I have ever made since I was old enough to walk and talk. You selected my schools. You mapped out my entire career trajectory. You even approved my first marriage. And on the one occasion when I finally chose a partner for myself, someone I genuinely came to love and respect, you dedicated 3 full years to methodically tearing her down and destroying her. I kept telling myself you were only trying to protect our family's legacy and standing. You were protecting nothing but your own deep-seated bigotry. Darius interjected quietly but firmly. Your reflexive hatred and your fundamental inability to view any person who looks or comes from a different background as fully equal and deserving of basic respect and humanity. Marcus turned back toward Darius with hollow, defeated eyes. I will testify. Against my mother. Against Victoria. I will turn over every piece of evidence I possess. Vivian Kensington emitted a sound that was half scream and half anguished sob. The raw, visceral noise of a once untouchable dynasty collapsing into irreparable fragments before her eyes. The elegant terrace descended into complete pandemonium. Guests scrambled toward their waiting cars and drivers. Reporters and camera crews seemed to materialize from nowhere as news of the confrontation spread like wildfire. Security personnel stood uncertainly, no longer clear whom they were actually supposed to be protecting or defending. Yet in the very center of that swirling chaos, Elena located a microphone that had been left on the small stage where Victoria had delivered her triumphant announcements barely 90 minutes earlier. The remaining guests who had not yet fled fell into an uncertain, expectant hush as she stepped up. 6 months ago, I stood before family and friends and married a man I sincerely believed loved me for who I truly was, she began. Her voice emerged steady, strong, and resonant. The voice of a woman who had walked through intense fire and emerged determined not to be consumed by it. Yesterday evening, I was deliberately kicked in the stomach while carrying his unborn child in front of nearly 200 people. I begged openly for help and basic human intervention. Not one single person present spoke up on my behalf. Not one person stepped forward to intervene or even offer basic assistance. Not one person in that entire ballroom treated me as a fellow human being worthy of protection or simple decency. She scanned the faces still watching her, some downcast with shame, others defiant, most simply stunned into silence by the rapid turn of events. Today I stand before you not because my brothers arrived to rescue me like some damsel in a fairy tale. They did not save me. What they provided was something far more valuable and lasting than rescue. They reminded me, and now they have reminded all of you, of exactly who I have always been before I allowed myself to forget it amid the illusions of this world. She placed one hand gently over her belly, where her daughter continued to move with quiet strength. I am Dr. Elena Harper. I have safely delivered more than 940 babies into this world. I founded and built a scholars program that has already lifted more than 12,000 young people out of cycles of limitation and into brighter futures filled with real opportunity. I graduated from Harvard Medical School while balancing demanding clinical rotations and late-night study sessions. I have worked exhausting shifts to care for complete strangers who had no one else. I am not defined by victimhood. I am not a mere charity project or social experiment. I am not someone else's diversity initiative or temporary phase. I am a capable, accomplished woman who refused to allow herself to be erased. Her gaze found Marcus standing among the remnants of the crowd. He could not bring himself to meet her eyes. And to every single individual who witnessed what happened to me last night and chose deliberate silence instead of basic humanity, I do not require or expect your belated apologies. Apologies cost nothing and change even less. What I do ask is that each of you confront one honest, difficult question within yourselves. Why exactly did I remain silent when I saw clear injustice occurring? And then I ask that you make a personal commitment never to choose that same silence again in the future. Because silence when confronted with wrongdoing is never true neutrality. It is never simply minding your own affairs. It is active complicity. And complicity always extracts its own eventual price. She stepped down from the small stage with quiet dignity. The remaining crowd instinctively parted to create a path for her. As she passed close by Marcus, she paused for one final moment. I did love you once, she said softly, the words intended for his ears alone. That feeling was real on my side. And that truth is perhaps the saddest element in this entire painful chapter. She continued walking forward without hesitation and never once looked back. Outside the estate grounds, the machinery of accountability continued accelerating. Police cruisers, news vans, and the broader apparatus of public consequence were now fully engaged in catching up with the long untouchable Kensington name and legacy. Detective Naomi Brooks caught up with Elena near the edge of the property. Dr. Kensington, Elena, are you holding up all right after everything that has happened today? Elena considered the question with genuine seriousness. Her marriage lay in complete ashes. The man she had loved had never truly seen or valued her for herself. Her mother-in-law had invested years in engineering her public and private destruction. She had endured brutal public humiliation and a physical attack while pregnant. Yet her baby remained healthy and active. Her brothers stood solidly behind her. And for the first time in 3 long years, she felt as though she could finally draw a full, unencumbered breath without seeking permission or approval from anyone else. I will be, she replied with quiet conviction. I am going to be perfectly fine. A small, joyful commotion near one of the catering tents suddenly drew her attention. A little girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old and the daughter of one of the event's staff members, broke away from her mother and ran excitedly toward Elena. Dr. Elena! Dr. Elena! Elena knelt down carefully, recognizing the child immediately from one of her Scholars Program outreach visits several months earlier. Sweetheart, what are you doing here today? Come here. The little girl was practically bouncing with uncontainable excitement. I had to find you and tell you right away. I read an entire book all by myself yesterday, every single page without any help at all. Elena pulled the child into a warm, heartfelt embrace. Over the girl's small shoulder, she could see Darius watching them both. Her oldest brother, the same man who had once carried her piggyback style through the lively streets of their old Chicago neighborhood on summer evenings, was smiling broadly with visible tears glistening in his eyes. That is honestly the most wonderful news I have heard in a very long time, Elena told the girl sincerely. I am so incredibly proud of you and everything you are accomplishing. Behind her, the once mighty Kensington Empire continued its rapid, very public unraveling. In front of her, a young child had just discovered the transformative joy and power of reading for herself. Elena knew without any doubt which of those two realities carried infinitely more lasting importance and meaning. The headlines that followed in the days and weeks afterward chronicled the swift and spectacular fall of a once untouchable American dynasty. Victoria Langford ultimately pleaded guilty to the assault charge. Her sentence included 18 months of probation, mandatory community service hours at a local domestic violence shelter, and substantial financial restitution paid directly to Elena. Her once promising career within elite circles ended permanently. Every reputable firm in the industry blacklisted her name almost immediately. Yet something quietly transformative and unexpected began to emerge from the wreckage of her consequences. While completing her required service hours at the shelter, Victoria found herself truly listening, perhaps for the first time, to the painful, deeply personal stories shared by the women seeking safety and healing there. Women who had endured years of control, manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional destruction at the hands of partners who had once claimed to love them. Slowly, painfully, she began recognizing unmistakable patterns in her own past behavior, patterns she had willingly participated in and even weaponized against another woman. She eventually authored a raw, unflinching essay published on a major platform titled The Reflection I Spent Years Avoiding. The piece spread rapidly and widely, not because it sought or received easy forgiveness, but because its level of brutal, unvarnished honesty stood out sharply in an era filled with polished, carefully managed non-apologies and performative regret. I convinced myself for a long time that I was pursuing some form of justice or balance for the pain my own family had suffered, she wrote. But in reality, I simply became another version of the very abuser I claimed to despise. Elena Harper never caused harm to my family. I caused deep harm to hers. That is a truth I will carry with me for the rest of my life, and it has changed how I see myself and the world. Vivian Kensington's downfall proved even steeper and more isolating. The same elite social circles that had once celebrated and courted her for decades now treated her presence like something contagious and toxic to be avoided at all costs. Every charitable board she had sat on quietly removed her name from their rosters. Every exclusive social registry deleted her listings without fanfare. Former friends crossed streets or changed directions to avoid any awkward encounter. She was ultimately forced to sell the Grand Hamptons estate to help cover mounting legal expenses and settlements. Then the primary Manhattan townhouse followed. Then the extensive private art collection that had taken decades to assemble. She eventually found herself living in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet New Jersey suburb. For the first time in nearly 70 years of life, Vivian Kensington had to learn how to cook her own simple meals, clean her own living space, and navigate daily existence without the constant buffer of servants, assistants, or inherited privilege. The woman who had once openly scorned Elena's more grounded upbringing now resided in quarters smaller and simpler than the loving home where Elena had grown up, surrounded by family, resilience, and genuine affection despite limited financial means. Marcus Kensington cooperated fully during an exhaustive 11-hour deposition, turning over every requested document, email thread, and recorded conversation without reservation. His willingness to testify earned him some measure of prosecutorial leniency in the civil proceedings, but nothing could repair the irreparable damage done to his personal reputation or his own sense of self. The board of directors at Kensington Realty Group voted unanimously and swiftly to remove him from the CEO position. He retained a minority ownership stake, sufficient to live comfortably without working if he chose, but far too small to wield any real influence or power moving forward. He began attending intensive therapy sessions twice each week, working to understand how he had allowed himself to become the kind of man capable of standing silently while his pregnant wife was physically attacked, and then choosing inaction over basic loyalty and decency. He continued to pay his court-ordered child support promptly and without negotiation or complaint each month. He never once requested custody arrangements or visitation rights. Detective Naomi Brooks earned a well-deserved promotion to captain within the department. She channeled her new authority into the creation of a specialized investigative unit, focused on cases of domestic abuse and coercion occurring within wealthy or influential families, situations that had historically often escaped meaningful accountability because money could frequently purchase silence, influence, or favorable outcomes. She was later recognized as NYPD Officer of the Year for her leadership and dedication. During her acceptance remarks, she shared a statement that resonated nationally. There was one moment when I nearly chose the easier path of silence. I stood by and watched a pregnant woman endure a public assault, and I hesitated because I did not want to disrupt the event. I will never allow myself to make that same mistake again. And for the rest of my career, I intend to make certain that others in positions of authority do not make it either. Their daughter, Legacy Noelle Harper, entered the world on a gentle, rainy Tuesday morning in early spring. She weighed a healthy 7 pounds 5 ounces and announced her arrival with strong, lusty cries that echoed through the entire maternity wing. She was perfect in every possible way: tiny fingers, bright, curious eyes, and a spirit that already seemed determined. All three of Elena's brothers waited anxiously in the hospital corridor during the delivery. Darius cried openly and without embarrassment, though he would later deny the tears vigorously. Jamal purchased every single stuffed animal and soft toy available in the hospital gift shop, turning the recovery room into a colorful jungle of plush companions. The youngest brother had already established a substantial trust fund designed to guarantee Legacy access to the best educational opportunities available, but Elena made her wishes clear from the beginning. She wanted her daughter raised with purpose, values, and an understanding of service in addition to any material advantages. 6 months after Legacy's birth, the Legacy Noelle Maternal and Community Health Center officially opened its doors in the vibrant Chicago South Side neighborhood, where Elena had spent her own formative years. The same streets where she had once walked to school through winters that sometimes lacked reliable heat, yet never lacked for love, community, or encouragement from family and neighbors. The new center offered free and low-cost prenatal and postnatal care for mothers who otherwise had limited options. It provided comprehensive mental health support specifically tailored for survivors of abuse and trauma. It included job training and skills development programs for women rebuilding their lives after difficult chapters. Harper Global Ventures had funded the construction and initial operations, but Elena personally oversaw every aspect of daily management. She was present nearly every single day, holding newborn babies, listening attentively to frightened young mothers, offering guidance, and continuing to build an institution that would endure and serve long after any temporary scandal or headline had faded from public memory. She received an invitation to deliver a keynote address before the United Nations General Assembly on the often hidden realities of domestic abuse and coercive control within wealthy and influential circles. More than 27 million people eventually watched the recorded speech online. Financial resources and social status do not shield anyone from experiencing cruelty or injustice. She told the global audience with quiet passion. They simply allow that cruelty to present itself in more polished, expensive, and socially acceptable packaging. Money does not eliminate racism or prejudice. It frequently teaches those attitudes better manners and more sophisticated language. The only meaningful protection any of us truly have comes from individuals who consciously refuse to remain silent when they witness wrongdoing. From people who see clear injustice and choose to speak truth and take action anyway. That collective courage is what ultimately changes hearts, systems, and futures for the better. One full year after the fateful luncheon that had triggered the collapse of the Kensington Empire, Marcus sent Elena a single, handwritten letter on plain, unembellished stationery. It contained no elaborate apology. He understood that mere words could never repair or undo the depth of harm he had allowed and participated in. Instead, it expressed a humble, straightforward request. He wished for the opportunity to meet his daughter just once, if only to see her face and know that she was thriving. Elena read the letter carefully 3 separate times. She chose not to send any immediate reply. 3 months later, she mailed him a single photograph. In the image, Legacy was laughing joyfully in bright sunlight, her eyes sparkling with pure, uninhibited delight, eyes that unmistakably echoed her father's. On the reverse side, written in Elena's neat, deliberate handwriting, were the words, "She has your eyes. Show through your actions every single day that you are becoming someone truly worthy of seeing them in person someday." Marcus appeared to receive and understand the message clearly. He increased his volunteer commitment at the same domestic violence shelter where Victoria had completed her court-ordered service, dedicating 3 full days each week without fail. He was not laboring under any illusion that he could earn easy forgiveness or redemption. He was simply trying, with genuine effort for perhaps the first time in his privileged life, to become a better man than the one who had once stood by in silence. He had not yet fully arrived at that goal, and he might never completely reach it. But he was trying, honestly and consistently. The prominent sign positioned outside the front entrance of the new community health center reads simply, Legacy Noel Maternal and Community Health Center, because silence was never truly safe for anyone. Elena stands before that sign on a peaceful morning, her young daughter balanced comfortably on her hip, warm sunlight bathing both their faces. Behind her, 3 brothers who together oversee a vast business empire worth more than $38 billion argue lightheartedly and passionately over whose turn it is to hold the baby next. "You realize you never actually needed us to come riding in like this, right?" Darius says to her quietly, a note of affectionate pride in his voice. Elena smiles gently and shakes her head. "No, I didn't need rescuing. But I am so deeply grateful that you chose to show up anyway when it mattered most." She turns her gaze back toward the building, watching the steady stream of women and families walking through its doors in search of care, support, healing, and renewed hope. She looks at the tangible future being constructed quietly, one life strengthened and one opportunity created at a time. "I didn't need someone to save me," she says softly, almost to herself. "I needed to be truly seen and remembered for who I have always been. My brothers didn't rescue me from anything. They simply helped remind the wider world that I was never invisible to begin with." If you have ever found yourself silenced, dismissed, or diminished simply because of who you are, this story exists for you. If you have ever witnessed someone else being treated unjustly and felt the temptation to look away or stay quiet, this story exists for you as well. Share it with others. Speak up when it matters. And remember always that silence in the presence of clear harm is never neutral. It carries a cost. But courage, truth, and solidarity have the power to build legacies that endure far beyond any empire built on cruelty or exclusion.